I think sometimes just that voice of the CFO is helpful on the call. It just shows the customer or prospect the depth of awareness and the importance of that customer.
There's a term that I've seen you throw around before, and that's RevTech. Can you break that down for us?
Billing was the thing, and CPQ were the thing. Revenue was kind of the poor stepchild. Revenue is the driver. In 2017, 18, I had John Chambers, former CEO and chairman of Cisco, on our board, and he always talked about market timing. A startup has to time it right, and then also accelerate that even more.
RevOps implies you're just helping to get the deal done and you're assisting with the sales process, but we booked all these deals and it's messy, and I think you need to rethink the structure.
It really just gets back to that data piece. The good news is we have the best data. The bad news is we're at the end of a very long stream of data.
Is this thing on?
Yesterday's price is not today's price.
Welcome back to Run the Numbers, the podcast where we talk with the world's top CFOs. I'm CJ, a tech CFO, and my goal is to tease out the playbooks and tactics the best finance leaders rely upon to make you better at your job. On today's show, I'm speaking with Dan Miller. Dan is the Chief Financial Officer at RightRev, where he's building the infrastructure behind modern revenue recognition for complex models. Think subscriptions, usage, outcomes, and everything in between. He's also been the CFO at Fastly and spent a decade scaling NetSuite. So he's seen just about every stage, stack, and growth curve finance can throw at you. In this episode, we go deep on why leasing, yes, leasing, is underused in software and where it actually makes sense, the origin story of RevTech, and why revenue recognition may be the next great AI battleground, how Dan evaluates durable growth versus hypergrowth, and what a CFO should focus on when their company is good but not going bonkers, where AI helps in finance and where it's just fancy software with a solution looking for a problem, and what it's like being a CFO at a company that sells to CFOs and how that changes your relationship with sales. If you like the show, please remember to like and subscribe. It helps us with the algorithmic overlords. And if you're looking to hire the best finance and accounting talent, I'd love to help you. I have a recruiting service that will pair you with qualified and amazing candidates from our warm database full of podcast listeners and newsletter readers who self-select into learning about CAC payback periods on weekends. If that's of interest, shoot me an email at talent@mostlymetrics.com. On to today's episode with Dan Miller. Dan, welcome to the Run the Numbers podcast.
Thanks, buddy. Good to see you again.
You've been a CFO more times than I can count on one hand.
Well, I think the most interesting part of my career was when I did a right turn. I was CFO of about a $200 million private equity-backed company in San Francisco, software and services company called NetSuite, growing at about 34% a year, EBITDA positive, and we needed an ERP system. We had got the call, hey, the COO of NetSuite, Jim McKeever, wants to take you to a Warriors game and sit in the floor seats. Okay, twist my arm. I'll go do that. By the fourth quarter, Jim was saying, hey, I'd love to have you come run our largest vertical, which was the software vertical. So I ran about a $600 million ARR business for them for about 3 years before then going back and being a CFO again Fastly. But my point is that, yes, CFO, multi-stage, early stage, late stage, public, but the best part of my career, the most, I think, rewarding and helping me be a better CFO today was being a GM and seeing how all of those functional leaders, the marketing people, the demand gen, the sales people, the customer success support people, all of those things, including product, having those all report into me helps me be a better CFO today. I mean, I think you stand in the shoes of those people and have to manage their challenges. Not that you can't be if you just go be a CFO your whole career, but it certainly helped me to live that for 3 years and realize how challenging each of those jobs are. And I think I bring that today to my business partners and I can partner with them better.
Well, I'd like to ask you to reflect on what durable growth looks like, because you've seen growth of all different stages. You've seen growth where servers are melting off the wall. You've also seen companies that are trying to find their footing with a new product. How do you look at like a company's life cycle and what durable growth means at each stage?
Part of this is switching costs. I mean, as I'm watching this stuff, it's the innovation, the pace of innovation, the pace of product introduction, the pace of new companies is coming on market that you had AI native companies. Now it seems like there's even something newer than an AI native company. And if you're a company out there today looking at various vendors, you kind of got to go, well, am I going to buy this thing and it's going to be, I don't know about obsolete, but not the best thing in a month. And then also, as our investors have pointed out, we've got Norwest and other great investors. The incumbents aren't sitting, and doing nothing either. And they've got a whole bunch of other things that maybe these they can be earlier stage, very successful companies are having. So getting back to your question around durable growth, it really does ultimately, whether it's recurring or whether it's consumption or whatever the words are that everybody wants to wrap their head around, predictable and durable growth, I think, comes with that switching costs and your ability to retain those customers. And we're going to talk about, I think, a little bit later, how customer success is so critical and has to be really the whole org. I loved when you wrote that about the Snowflake thing, and I think that's really where this is all going. It was already there with SaaS, but I think you pointed out it was more event-driven. Now it's more of a everyday occurrence. But with all of the new innovation that's going on, it's really around that friction and around switching costs, and how easy or how hard it is. The other I think we'll talk a lot about this, I think, as well, which is just around the data piece. Who owns the data? How is that data being used? And all of the other stuff we're going to talk about around the hygiene of it will also be critical in terms of how durable that growth is.
You mentioned Snowflake, Dan. That's a customer that you're pretty close with, right?
Yeah, Joggin, our CEO and founder, from day one was their design partner as they went through a journey around how they were going to price and package. And there were multiple chapters to their journey. We actually took 2 major chapters with them as marketplaces have become more prevalent, as discounting and gross margin at various ways of using credits becomes more complex. We had to take 2 tiers of them, sort of their initial, and then really about a year and a half ago, they went to the street, said, we're changing our model. And we took that journey with them and had to change our product significantly. I would say 3 years ago, there was this use case around, we call it dynamic discounting, which is sort of discounting and allocations changing each period, not set it and forget it for an entire contract. That use case was probably 3 years ago, not prevalent. I would say in almost each case that we go into now with the prospect, we are seeing that use case around complexity of dynamic discounting and the allocations that are done for the contract across the elements changing much more frequently. It may not be monthly in some cases, but it'll depend, all driven around the consumption model. So Snowflake has been great at helping us innovate, and I think they're super happy with us as a vendor, and also they're an investor. Your piece you wrote up recently was fantastic in terms of breaking some of that down. I don't know if the audience has read that, but if they haven't, it was a really great write-up.
Thank you. I appreciate that, especially from a practitioner like yourself. And I just think that Snowflake has been such a pioneer in how to build a business around a commitment-based model. And a lot of people say, oh, that's just how they price. I'm like, no, that's how you run your entire business.
There were these mega companies doing it already, but incrementally it didn't matter to them. It did matter to our friends at Snowflake, who are trying to manage growth and margin and do all that predictability. And one thing I wanted to talk about in there, just really double click into, and this is actually worth spending a minute on, is when I left NetSuite, I became CFO of Fastly, which was 95% consumption.
Wow, I did not know that.
Building that forecast model was kind of what you alluded to, which was looking at history. Okay, there's an election, there's a Super Bowl, there's a whatever, there's seasonality, there's whatever. And then you kind of segment customers and do all of that, which was great. It's absolutely table stakes and super hard to do. Now what's happening, right? And what happened to us at Fastly was we wanted some predictability. We wanted to take something in there and just try and it wouldn't be 100% because we're never going to get away from that sort of usage thing, but try and build some more pieces in there. Maybe it's services, maybe it was some things were subscription around some security product or whatever. So we can munch into that and just kind of stabilize it a little bit. It's happening a little bit in reverse now. I think you pointed this out, which is some of the pricing and packaging that's going on as a tester with consumption while keeping the subscription model. And then I think probably at some point start to invert for a lot of the legacy players. But for a consumption-based company today that's looking to do this, I mean, what's happening there is, in terms of the forecasting, is you're now not just forecasting the consumption. Those allocations are changing as you go. And now you're not only just forecasting consumption, you're forecasting the change in those allocations and why that's important besides just how much revenue you're going to recognize in a period and running scenarios around that, putting on your FP&A hat. But then gross margin impact, because you're shifting amongst higher or lower gross margin elements, and now it's affecting your gross margin. And By the way, we're working on this product. It's going to come out in the next quarter. And I think it's going to be a game changer for folks, particularly for the FP&A side, but also kind of the controllership side and of course, the CFO around doing those scenarios, not just at when are we going to see more consumption, usage, and then, bill that all and then get the revenue, but that allocation piece, which no one is able to do other than us. Aaron Levy at Box is really doing a lot of really great thinking, I think, around this. One of the things we feel really, really good about is at RightRev is we, of course, work with great partners like Salesforce and a whole bunch of other billing systems, and they have great data, and they provide us that data because you need it for RevRec. We're doing the allocations piece, which no one else has. You're able to do some things along the forecasting side that others can't do, and that's where I think we can help CFOs, but also kind of the FP&A folks doing some of the allocations around some of these more complex situations.
Context is king, especially when it comes to forecasting your revenue in a commitment or usage-based model. And I came from the enterprise SaaS world at first, where they paid us the same amount every month, even if they didn't show up. It was like the Planet Fitness model. But then I worked at a completely usage-based, there weren't even any commitments. It was just usage-based of how many orders you did. You find these very interesting quirks and seasonality that you have to just understand the rhythm of the business and live it quarter to quarter to forecast it. And so Monday was always our highest order day of the week, right? And then Tuesday was 5% less, then Wednesday was 5% less. Then you get to the end of the week and you're at about 80-ish% of what Monday was. But then you can also have some customers that are active on weekends. So a Saturday was worth 0.25, whatever a Monday was, and a Sunday was worth 0.1. But then, we have Labor Day. What's the analog to that? Do we look back in time and say, what was Labor Day the last time? Or what about Christmas when it fell on a Wednesday 7 years ago? What does that look like?
Maybe to even use one of the use cases we're working on now with a customer, AI company with a capability that the whole idea is that the AI will capture the situation. That capture rate is another lever. Like, you're now forecasting not just volume and growth and everything else. You have to now guess at how successful will your product be around the growth in that. So it is to your point, it is a multi-dimensional problem, and getting that right, of course, is fundamental. Then I think the allocations piece and then that gross margin piece gets really interesting as well. I've just seen I guess we're expecting by 2028, we're expecting something around 70 to 80% of these models to be consumption heavy, if not consumption based.
Hey, thanks for listening. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors. Being a CFO, you know how much I love tools that actually make the lives of accounting and finance folks easier. One of my favorite tools right now is Rillet, the AI native ERP going head to head with NetSuite. Yes, someone is finally doing it. I met Rillet 2 years ago when they were still in stealth. Since then, they've absolutely taken the finance world by storm. Their mission is to make the zero-day close a reality, and they're actually doing it. Customers are literally closing their books at 1:35 p.m. on the first day of the month. They've got everything you need to scale your business: complex revenue recognition, native integrations, custom reporting, multi-entity, close management, and much more. They're only a few years in and are already supporting NASDAQ publicly listed companies. Yes, seriously. If you want to scale your business on an ERP that wasn't built in the 90s, you need to check out Rillet. Book a demo at rillet.com/CJ. Oh, cool, that's me. That's RILLET.com/CJ. RILLET.com/CJ. Tell them I sent you there. Ali and the team at Tabs are building something that directly addresses one of the biggest headaches I see finance teams deal with today: pulling data from your ERP, your CRM, your FP&A tools, and your usage systems and actually making it all work together. If you're running usage-based pricing or complex contracts, you already know how this usually plays out. Contracts live in one system, usage data lives somewhere else, billing happens in another tool. RevRec gets layered on top at month end, and finance ends up just reconciling everything by hand to close the books. This is exactly the problem Tabs was built to solve. Tabs is an AI-native revenue platform built for controllers and CFOs. It brings together data from your ERP, CRM, and real product usage into a single system of record. From there, it automates billing, collections, and revenue recognition without finance having to duct tape workflows together every month. If usage-based revenue is core to your business, this is the future of how billing and RevRec get done. Go check them out at tabs.com/run. That's tabs.com/run. We've all been burned. We've all bought that enterprise planning tool that promised the world, only to realize 6 months later that we've basically taken on a second full-time job just to keep the software running. I want to talk about a company that was built specifically to kill that cycle, Abacus. I actually remember my very first conversation with their founder and CEO, Julio Martinez, over 3 years ago. Back then, they were just starting out in Spain. Fast forward to today, Julio moved the home base to NYC, and they're the engine behind finance teams at Strava, Replit, and JG Wentworth. Abacus doesn't turn you into a software admin. The integrations are actually self-service. You don't need a $300 an hour consultant to plug in your ERP or HRIS, and they're doing AI in a way that actually impacts the things FP&A teams are doing every day. Things like creating variance summaries, building formulas, and modeling scenarios. If you're scaling fast and you're trying to avoid that legacy platform trap, Abacus is the move. They're building the future of our tech stack, and they're doing it with a CFO's perspective. Go to abacus.ai to see it for yourself. That is abacus.ai. This is just a fun one to riff on, but something I've seen at least in the subscription space, so just to move to that for a sec, because I know you're passionate about revenue, is there are a lot of these new age AI companies, Dan, and they're selling a 3-month pilot at like a pretty small cost. Let's say it's $3,000. They're multiplying it by 4 and saying, look, everybody, we got $12,000 in ARR. And not only are they claiming it's all ARR, they're paying their sales reps on it as if they have a $12,000 booking.
This actually gets to another thing, which I think we'll start to see more of, is the concept of a commit, right? Is that yes, your credits, but you got to use, and of course that's already prevalent. The rep is just, yeah, you went through the scenarios. The rep is super disincentivizing and trying to figure out how to do that. The subscription model had a lot of blessings, and unfortunately they're going away a little bit. It is tough to comp people on this. We actually engaged the Alexander Group on it to try and help with some of the more complex situations around the consumption model when I was at Fastly. It's an endless topic, but you have the use case that you're talking about too. So you sell the trial and you get, let's say it's at 100K.
Mm-hmm.
How long does that rep keep that account? And let's say they do nothing for 6 months, and then, in month 10, suddenly they do a $5 million deal. Does that rep get anything? It's a really tricky situation because obviously that's a huge commission to pay out to somebody. So these situations and use cases are very challenging.
And Snowflake had to go through multiple iterations of how they compensated reps too, because with a rep who maybe can't impact like day-to-day the workflows that get moved over to have the taxi meter running. So how do you look at it in terms of just getting that booking? Is that just the start of the process versus the actual consumption that happens, which leads to that future booking if it's successful?
Absolutely. Well, and it does start to lead you down a path of how much of this can be self-serve. And I think there's an element of this around, again, margins and profitability and cash flow that you talked about as well. And that relates to when do we pay people out versus when do we collect on these things? It really gets into CFOs. We got a lot of things going on the revenue side, but to your point, we also got them going on the expense side in terms of compensation.
You're so right, because there are a lot of companies out there who don't align their cash strategy at the company level to their cash strategy at the rep and commission level.
We just came out with a lessor accounting product, which is the first of its kind that allows a company to do 842 lease accounting along with revenue recognition, ASC 606.
Can you just explain like a lessor scenario?
The most basic thing you can think of is if you lease a car. I'm thinking about tech equipment. I was a VP controller of Extreme Networks, and we would get a big order and they'd say, well, no, we want to do a lease structure. So you would do the order and you would just basically add to that. You'd flip it over into a financing leasing company and you'd get the rev rec. Now with 842 and 606. How you do that is sequentially, you would apply the lease accounting rules and then the 606 rules to be able to capture the various elements of that. Now, getting away from a car and now starting to think about it as hardware. You got hardware, software, services, whatever else, support, and you're bundling all of that together. Now you have a multi-element arrangement. And of course, we're not going to go through all of that again. The point was, in a world where we're talking about monetization, in a world where we're talking about customers wanting to pay monthly or quarterly or whatever versus kind of annual all up front, I start to think about why isn't the lease structure used in software more often? Of course, there's nothing too secure per se, but I do think it matches very well helping companies pay more over time, but actually then allowing vendors like software, our customers, be able to sell more stuff using that lease approach. I do wonder if it's going to become more prevalent, is really my question. And we won't know. We certainly see it on the hardware side a lot. I just wonder if it'll be there on the software side.
In some ways, it reminds me of companies securitizing the chips that they have. And you could argue, well, how useful are these chips if they only have a useful life of like 4 to 5 years or something like that? But we're definitely moving towards a world where hardware is sexy again. There are a lot of companies out there that are blending both software and hardware, and it's going to impact how the P&L looks and how the balance sheet looks.
We were actually having the conversation yesterday about, kind of OpenAI, NVIDIA, and we're excited about it. RightRev thrives in complexity. If you've got a straightforward business model, straight consumption or straight subscription, we're happy to work with you, but it's probably not the complexity that we deal with all of our customers. So the more complex and more higher scale you have is really where we kick in. Literally had a call with a very complex situation in a Singapore company that's doing some very innovative things. The more complexity, the better for our product. It's where we tend to differentiate ourselves. And the point there is, let CFOs not worry about the back office stuff. Really worry about thinking about how to best monetize. That's why I bring up the lease approach. If lease ends up being somebody that helps you sell more software, why wouldn't you do it?
Dan, what do you think the CFO's role is in sales? I know you could say, well, CFOs, they sell the company to get capital and stuff, but you're literally the CFO of a company for CFOs. You get plugged in there?
I have to give credit where credit's due here. My GM role at NetSuite was an outgrowth of Jim McKeever, who was the original CFO of NetSuite. He liked being a CFO, but he really liked being a sales guy. So he spent about 25% of his time being CFO, wrote it all the way through from early stage to public company, eventually became the COO and my boss. But he was spent 75% of his time selling from very early on. And so when he became COO and moved on, he needed somebody to backfill on the sales side. So I was VP Finance at GM. And so I just learned from him really how to do this. And it is getting out there in the trenches, understanding the use cases, understanding the product very deeply, as in hands-on, being able to admin the product, essentially. Yes, it is unique because we are selling to the office of the CFO, and those situations are unique. If you're selling something else, it may not be as relevant. Even then, I sort of would maybe challenge our friends in the CFO world to understand that market very well, maybe not be the trusted advisor on something that isn't office of the CFO. That's sort of tough. I mean, you and I have seen it all. We've been through hyperscale, whatever. So it's helpful to know that we're in a whole bunch of different companies every day, but I think it makes the job a lot more fun because you are now not just the back office CFO, you are very much in front of the customer. So when you're doing things like pricing and packaging, you're not just coming at it from a spreadsheet or a gross margin perspective. Of course, you're going to do that, but you're really thinking about it from the lens of the customer and helping win that sales team and marketing team generate leads and then ultimately win deals.
Just to get more tactical here, so there are probably a lot of people out there listening who say, that's great, I want to help on sales, but we don't sell to CFOs. Put yourself on a sales call. What are the ways that a CFO can help move the needle? Is it just on, I can give you better payment terms, or are there other ways that you can help influence the buyer?
Certainly on those things, that's where people are going to expect you to contribute, is sort of contract structure and all of that. And that actually gets directly back to the monetization theme. So we're sort of beating that horse, but it's so true. If you don't have a back office as a CFO that can support some of those things, payment structure being more on the more simplistic end, as you add exceptions and other sort of modifications to a contract, being able to account for them in the back office without doing backflips and killing yourself and hiring a bunch of accountants is super important. Look, I think sometimes just that voice of the CFO is helpful on the call, especially if you're in the earlier stage around the credibility, financial stability of the company and all of that sort of stuff. I think it just shows the customer or prospect the depth of awareness and of the importance of that customer. The first demo, you're probably not having this. In my case, I am. But in the case where it's not an office of the CFO thing, you got to judge every situation. But I think it just shows the commitment to that customer and making that customer successful.
That's such a great point, because sometimes it's just the presence of, this is worth my time and I just want to be here to be a resource to you as the CFO. And if you're an earlier stage company and you're trying to sell, it's like, this is an expensive hourly call for us.
I've probably in an hour call maybe talk for 2 minutes. They're very important 2 minutes, I believe, and I've seen them be very important. Again, I learned it from Jim. I think the voice of the CFO is very important.
So you mentioned getting your team in order. There's a term that I've seen you throw around before, and that's RevTech. Can you break that down for us?
We're sort of creating the term, and it's always a little concerning to do that until you test it. And so I wanted to test it on you and maybe your audience.
Let's workshop this here.
There's RevOps, right? The importance of that is where you and I spend a lot of our time, let's
Totally.
face it. So I think just aligning with that, we aren't pretending to do anything around billing or CPQ. Those are our friends and partners. We will never do that. We're going to stay strictly around revenue. Maybe again, to your point a little bit on the Snowflake thing where billing was the thing and CPQ were the thing. Revenue was kind of the poor stepchild. I love that about your Snowflake example, which is super important, CPQ and billing. You got to be able to do those things. You got to be able to bill things. Revenue is the driver. That's what we're seeing is that, look, there's a ton of vendors very capable of solving those problems on CPQ and billing, and they'll continue to evolve and improve and get better. Where the pain that we see every day is that there really aren't ready for the revenue piece. But I think that's why we sort of think this RevTech term is very interesting because, yeah, it's focused on revenue.
I think it is time for a new term around that because RevOps implies you're just helping to get the deal done and you're assisting with the sales process. But if you flip the model on its head and you're using revenue as a driver as to where the company is going, you're not using it anymore as, hey, we just got to clean up this shit after because we booked all these deals and it's messy and that was the compelling event, then I think you need to rethink the structure.
It really just get that back to that data piece. The good news is we have the best data. The bad news is we're at the end of a very long stream of data. We are dependent on so many subsystems in that case, or kind of upstream data that is critical to our success. And so the dependencies are there and the partnerships need to be there. So I think the technology is critical. We've got some really incredible innovations coming out here in the next couple of quarters around how to handle that data, create hygiene, sequence it, and everybody's working on this problem. But in our particular case, as it relates to revenue, we've got some exciting things working on there.
Hey, thanks for listening. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors. Well. Here's what nobody tells you about being a CFO. You'll spend 50% of your time on stuff that is killing your momentum. The best CFOs I know are business leaders who know how to drive growth in heroic fashion. But most of us end up spending our days buried in manual work. I'm talking about collecting receipts, reviewing expenses, and manually reconciling spend. It's painful. That's why CFOs need Brex. Brex built an intelligent finance platform that pairs corporate cards with built-in expense management, plus a team of AI agents to handle the manual finance tasks for you. That way CFOs have more time for the high-impact projects that drive growth. The shit actually worthy of your CFO time. Bottom line, Brex is automating hundreds of thousands of hours of manual finance work every month across 35,000 companies like Anthropic, Coinbase, and DoorDash. Ready to spend less time buried in expenses and more time driving results? Check out Brex at brex.com/metrics. It is brex.com/metrics. Please, guys, how the hell do I have 3 kids in daycare? Brex.com/metrics. You just launched a new AI product. The new pricing page looks great. I'm talking crisp. But behind it, last-minute glued code, messy spreadsheets, and running ad hoc queries to figure out what to bill. Customers get invoices they can't understand. Engineers are chasing billing bugs. Finance can't close the books. Well, with Metronome, you hand it all off to the real-time billing infrastructure that just works. Reliable, flexible, and built to grow with you. They turn raw usage events into accurate invoices, give customers bills they actually understand, and keep every team in sync in real time. Whether you're launching usage-based pricing, managing enterprise contracts, or rolling out new AI services, Metronome does the heavy lifting so you can focus on your product, not your billing. That's why some of the fastest growing companies in the world like OpenAI and Anthropic run their billing on Metronome. Visit metronome.com to learn more. That's metronome.com. Here's a growth tax nobody talks about. Every new monetization model you ship creates a nightmare for your finance team. Add usage-based pricing? Now you're tracking consumption against commitments. Launch product bundles? That's multiple performance obligations per contract. Offer mid-cycle upgrades? Woo! Good luck reallocating revenue manually. But that's exactly where RightRev shines. RightRev is the revenue recognition engine built for companies that can't afford to let accounting slow down growth. When your rev rec is automated, your product team can ship new pricing without asking finance for permission. And your sales team can close creative deals without worrying about downstream chaos. To get up on my CFO soapbox for a sec, I love talking about creative pricing models, hybrid pricing, credits, tiered usage. But I've seen too many companies where the sales team is celebrating a huge quarter while finance is still trying to figure out how to recognize half of it. In a world where your pricing model might change 3 times next year, that flexibility is everything. If you want to scale your monetization without breaking your books, visit RightRev.com. That's RightRev.com, where modern monetization meets bulletproof accounting. You led me right to my next question, because me and you collaborated on this State of AI in Finance report. And I wanted to walk through with you where AI is actually useful in RevRec. We can be honest, because there may also be spots where AI is actually just software looking for a problem that we've already solved.
I think the FOMO thing is real. Nothing I've seen. I mean, Stanford just did a study a couple of weeks ago where practitioners are doing very simple use cases with very simple steps with lots of human review. And I think that's just indicative. Will it change in a year, of course, and things, were going to happen here. But we don't see a world that'll be extreme where, sort of an order comes in and suddenly revenue spits out the back because the agents are doing it. What we do see is a lot around that hygiene stuff and the data and the synchronization of these systems. Ultimately, if we can just know that data that we have in RightRev is accurate, we're going to get revenue right every time. That being said, we got to run around and get a lot of data synced up, and that's a great use for an agentic approach and some of the data stuff that we're working on. The other example, and we can demo these today, they're super exciting, I think is around productivity and error reduction are the two things that those are the two dimensions that we're focused on in our product. And the productivity piece, so you come up with a new SKU and the ability of a human could go and take a look at all of the other similar offerings and do that. Here's the RevRec rule for this particular SKU. An agent could do it quicker and probably better if you've got hundreds or thousands of SKUs. There's other things around kind of proofing out journal entries and deferred revenue reconciliations and those kinds of things that are more, I would say, table stakes things that are already fairly easy today. Any of the recon stuff I think is pretty basic at this point. You see all of these AI-based close management stuff doing the recon stuff. So those are the kinds of things that we're focused on, is around data synchronization and sort of those errors are eliminated, and then also just some of the productivity stuff.
I want to zoom back out on just the finance stack in general, because there's this word that's thrown around a lot when we talk about AI, and it's deterministic. Can you just make that real for people? Because I feel like the definition gets conflated a lot.
Revenue recognition is rules-based. We all know that. And so using an agentic approach, which is by definition probabilistic, and I'll come back to probabilistic in a second, it's really not going to fly with auditors at this point, certainly, or really CFOs, or controllers, or anybody around the table. So the deterministic approach within revenue recognition is here to stay certainly for the foreseeable future. IBM did a study fairly recently, which using an agentic approach and a probabilistic approach, converging on a deterministic approach, we'll get there someday. It's in some research lab within IBM. These things are moving very quickly, but when that day comes, we'll embrace those things, but we don't see that being out in the field in operations anytime soon. Within actual revenue recognition, that deterministic approach, a rules-based approach, is not going anywhere anytime soon.
You can run really cool forecasts to the moon with probabilistic outcomes, but you may not be able to recreate it. It's kind of like searching for a needle in a haystack, and you're going to pull something different out every time. There's certain elements of finance where deterministic A plus B is always going to equal C. That's a feature. That's not a bug.
I've been CFO of 3 cybersecurity companies. These agents and being floating around in systems, I think I'm talking to a variety of companies in cybersecurity that are just working on this exact approach, but they're not out in production yet in the real world. They're still very early stage products. So all the CIOs in the world and the CISOs of the world are quite nervous about their ability to have these agents flying around in their system. So it's going to be a little while before the enterprise is adopting these things for a variety of reasons, probably beyond the two that I'm mentioning, but it is super exciting. Like, I think a year from now, you and I are hopefully talking and have a lot of fun. But right now, I certainly for the next year, I think it's going to be a steady as she goes in some of these corner case use cases. I should mention, so we're out talking to a variety of stage companies. We're anything from high growth stage company, this might be a $50 to $100 million ARR company, up to tens of billions I mentioned earlier. So they're asking, what's your AI strategy? But they're not actually expecting or wanting really anything in our product that's really AI for the most part. Those earlier stage companies, they're more interested in sort of what we're doing there and want to see stuff. So we do see the spectrum of companies that are doing that. I would imagine that will continue to creep up, but you think about the CISO of the $10 billion company, not really excited about having some of these things in his network at this point.
You have kind of this contest in my mind of you have the incumbents trying to innovate faster than the new players can find distribution. What do you think of this whole new age player versus incumbents? Who ends up winning? And maybe it's different depending on the category you're in, but there is that real fight.
So in 2017, 18, I had John Chambers, former CEO and chairman of Cisco, on our board. And he always talked about market timing. A startup has to time it right and then also accelerate that even more. I think, frankly, just getting over the skis a lot on some of this stuff, and it's fine that if I was them, I'd be doing the same thing. No problem there. I have no ethical problem with that. But in terms of where things are actually at, we all sort of know. The surveys are being done. The data is being produced by credible, places like Stanford and Berkeley and IBM that show that it's really not out there. But that's the game people are playing. They're just trying to accelerate market adoption by saying you're missing out.
So it's the FOMO effect. I see a lot of companies right now and they're raising a ton of money multiple times in 1 year. And part of me is like, good for you. You filled up the war chest. But then I'm also like, it's going to be a lot harder to recruit employees if your 409A goes up. And also scarcity can be a good thing because it makes it so you don't fund the B and C projects.
It truly is. I mean, I think efficiency and scarcity is good. And they're being told by their investors to not worry about that scarcity thing right now. So there's spend, do whatever they got to do. Look, I think the thing we all know is going to happen in that space, and I'm not, again, particularly any sector within there, but there's just going to be a ton of consolidation and failure within there. They're going to run out of money, and I think they're going to overcommit. If I specifically, and I'm not picking on vendors here, but I'm just saying because of my days at NetSuite, the ERP thing is a tricky one, but revenue recognition is too. But you don't just sort of pull an ERP system and then say, oops, I'm going to rip it out and go to another one. It's super painful. I think we're going to see a lot of unhappy customers for a while and some churn in those spaces because those products can't be as mature as NetSuite. And NetSuite is waking up. That's one of the things we love about what we do, right? Is that innovation is constant. Sometimes it's higher, sometimes it's lower, but it does ultimately cause, kind of the rising tide and makes, at least our office of the CFO job, hopefully makes them a lot easier. I mean, look at NetSuite, right? I mean, the cloud thing took forever for cloud ERP to happen. And those guys grinded away for years at NetSuite. And finally, it took off. And I think a similar thing's going to happen here.
Some will win, like inevitably one or two of these companies. I'm keen on a couple, particularly in the ERP space, who I think will win. It'll be kind of like the story of Wiz. Like both of us were in cybersecurity before. That's a story of a company that everyone was like, they're at like $1 billion valuation at $10 million in ARR or something. And it actually worked out. But then you see all the bodies on the side of the road of all the other cybersecurity companies who also took on the funding. And it didn't end up in a $32 billion acquisition of Google.
So I talked to 10 employee kind of cybersecurity guy yesterday, founder, CEO. And I mean, it's an interesting time. I mean, you and I would say, well, there was a time where if you got to $1 million of ARR in year one, it'd be like, what? Like, what are you talking about? How did you do that? Did you get one deal? Now it's kind of almost expected. I mean, you got to be in revenue fairly quickly. And then not only that, I'll call it hyperscaler kind of rates that to be even get investors and investor dollars, which is why maybe your friends in the ERP space are certainly seeing that. And so that's why they've raised multiple rounds. It's an interesting time, and it does get back to your durable growth. Is a lot of this growth truly durable? And the Lovables and the other guys that are out there, I'm not in a position to say one way or the other, but it is a really interesting time. But it is having this sort of tangential effect on the rest of the market.
Today, only the companies, it seems like, who are tripling year on year are getting the headlines. But the reality of the companies that I talk to is the majority of them are not in hypergrowth mode. And it doesn't mean that they're bad companies. There are a lot of great companies who just aren't growing 300% year on year. What do you think a CFO is supposed to do? What can they impact if the company's good, but it's not growing like wildfire?
This is a $64,000 question for so many CFOs right now, because you're right. The majority of them are not. But that's what the investment community is really looking for. Now, I think they'll temper those things. I do think it ultimately does get back to the durable growth. If I look at our customer base, we're just a nice, solid, super company that's growing very well. It's almost impossible for us to hyperscale. It's just because of the complexities that we deal with and the sales cycles. It may be tertiary, buddy. I think it maybe gets this window in time. You and I have been through these cycles before. I mean, maybe one of the stories we'll tell a little bit later is this very successful company in the late 90s, big IPOs, and then the bubble burst. We all kind of went through that. I think this is one of those. It may not have a bubble bursting. I'm not saying that, of course. That's a whole other discussion, but certainly this has to temper a little bit because, as you're saying, some very good companies that have very nice exits in them somewhere. I do think there's some glut at the PE element of the market and investor market, the sponsors. I think there is what we're seeing, which everybody's adding sort of this consumption piece, because if you can price and package it right, you can drive more quick, immediate growth through that consumption piece. And I think back to what we were saying earlier, I think not only that, but also the agentic capabilities are sort of alluding and combining to where I think CFOs are embracing that because they can see some more accelerated growth.
Damn, when I was looking at your resume, you've served in multiple industries from cyber to LiDAR to back office in different stages. Like you mentioned before, early stage, fast growing, also public. How did you find your own personal product market fit as a CFO, whether that be by industry or company size and stage?
Ultimately, it was always about growth. Even in the company that was growing at 40% a year, which is obviously nothing like we're growing currently at RightRev or many of the previous startups. It was a right time, right place, 2008, and everything else was in the tank. Got a call from Heidrick and said, Heidrick and Struggles said, hey, here's a company. And energy efficiency and smart grid were hot at a time when nothing else was. And so we were growing at 40% was really good. I think it's always been about growth because I think with growth comes challenges, makes the CFO job a lot more interesting. I'm probably not that guy that's going to be just super focused on a basis point for you. That's probably not me. I'm more entrepreneurial, just like you and many other folks on your podcast. So that's where I think it gets fun, is where, how do you expand? How do you grow? How do you get more efficient within that while you're growing? Is super fun. And I think anybody could do the back office piece, kind of do all that sort of stuff, something, you can get better at over time. But I think moving to that front office piece and really being part of that growth and a growth catalyst.
A lot of the listeners are finance leaders, whether that be a director of FP&A, VP of finance, or a CFO, and they find themselves then working at a company that is not AI. Maybe it's a marketplace, maybe it's vertical software, and they have this sense of FOMO, but they're still at a good business. What would you say to those people who are trying to navigate if they should jump to a shiny object?
Well, if you've got a good mentor and a good boss and you're learning a lot, I sort of rotate towards the good mentor and a happy life. I, have certainly gone on those rocket ships and things can go south fairly quickly. In some cases, that's the volatility we deal with in this marketplace. One thing that doesn't go away and is, to use the word durable, you got a good boss. You're a happy camper within the company and you're learning a lot and it's helping you grow as a professional. I don't think that ever goes away. I just had so many great bosses in my career. I just go down the list. One thing I love working with Jogging every day is helping build this business is super fun. We're great partners in crime, trying to figure out how to grow it and deal with some of these really interesting challenges. And it's great to have a guy to sort of work through those things.
There's something to be said about having a really good CEO-CFO relationship, because when I became a CFO for the first time, it was this weird thing where it was the first time in my career, Dan, I wasn't reporting to a finance person. So I had to change the way I interacted a bit. And it's a bit different in your scenario, right, Rev, because you're making a finance product. But in a lot of the scenarios, I bet, in your career, you had to figure out how the whole song and dance went in the balance between you and the CEO.
I was brought in by an investor because spending was a little higher than they wanted it to be, or maybe more than a little. So there's my first meeting with Jogging.
That's a tough meeting.
Ultimately, it's about, do you like each other? Do you trust each other? And are you going to work together to solve the problems that we did? And from day one, there was a lot of trust. That hasn't always been the case. That's not, it does depend, and it can be very challenging. I've been blessed in many cases, though. You have to have done the work. You have to be smart enough. You have to have intellectual curiosity about the business. I mean, that's one thing I maybe say for the younger folks that listen to you, is that don't just stay in the back office. Go to that all hands meeting where they're talking about some new product or some arcane support thing or whatever the heck it is, because that really does help you grow as a professional. I started out in audit, right? You're like sitting there going, this is the dumbest job ever. I'm just basically looking at these invoices. But what you can pick up is, what did that billing person do? What did that AP person do? What did the procurement person do? And now you're actually starting to understand how a business works.
So Dan, I'm going to take you into what we call our long ass lightning round. And so you're a successful guy. I ask every successful leader on the show, give me one thing you've messed up on the job before. It could be this job or a different one.
So there was a time in my life when there was a lot going on, and I was probably a stressed out guy. And I would say lost my cool. It was only a mentor that saved me from that and sort of made me realize that just, it's not that important, and take a minute to gather yourself. I would say that's it. I don't know that I've ever sort of thankfully messed up anything that I can remember materially on the technical side. But as you know, that's a small piece of the job. Most of the time, it's really the interpersonal side and how you deal with people. But
It is.
I would say that looking back at my career, there's probably a 5-minute period of time where I feel like I probably should have not behaved in a certain way. It certainly wasn't out of bounds. And instead, it was really more just stress getting to me. That was probably the issue.
I have an exact 4.5-minute period of my life where I regret things that I said and lost my cool. So I'm there with you, man.
Good, buddy.
If you could tell your younger self something, knowing what you know today, what would you tell them?
Yeah, it's get the good mentors. And if you get one, just leech off them as best you can, treat them right, make them look good, and really latch onto them for your career because they just are people. If you find the right ones, I still have an audit partner at Deloitte who I checked with 30-something years ago.
You really?
Yeah, John Kelman at Deloitte, probably the biggest audit partner in the San Jose office. He's now retired 2 years, but he was a guy that just took me under his wing right from the get-go. And, still to this day is somebody I check with, particularly since he was a RevRec expert, my sort of general ledger person. She worked for me for 4 companies in 15 years. Those people as well. You're blessed to find people that like working with you and that are amazing at what they do. I think that's probably the other one.
Next one for you, more of a technical one. Can you walk me through your finance software stack? What tools does your team use to get the job done?
Rippling on the HCM side. It's NetSuite for ERP. It's Brex for credit card stuff. We're not doing the ramp thing, even though it seems everybody's doing the ramp thing. I still do my model in good old Excel, and I like to do it that way. I think it allows me to see some things. I certainly am using some AI capability to do the scenarios, but that is that. And then for T&E, we're using Expensify.
Nice. It's a good stack.
We wanted to drink our own champagne, so we do not need the level of automation with our volume today or even our complexity to have the stack that we have, but we use Salesforce, CPQ, what they call RCA, and billing, RCB, down into RightRev because roughly half our customers sort of had that flow today to help us with new product features. So that's our stack.
This has been an absolute blast to hang out with you. Anytime we can hang out, I appreciate it.
I do too, buddy. Talk to you about this all the time offline. What you do for the community is absolutely amazing. I literally can't wait to see your blog posts and the stuff that you're doing and the people you're talking to. I don't know that your younger listeners realize 30 years ago when I started my career, none of this was happening. You literally had to go talk to somebody to figure this out. The fact that you can blast this stuff out and make it happen and really share this kind of knowledge is just gold for these people. And it's really great what you do.
I'm putting that on a commercial. Thanks, man.
Thanks, bud.
Run the Numbers is a mostly media production. Yelling and intro by Fat Joe. Artwork by Meg D'Alessandro. Show is executive produced by Ben Hillman. Nothing said on this podcast is intended to be business or investment advice. It's the sole opinion of me, a guy who feeds his dog way too much ice cream and has a history of net operating losses. LOL. If you like this podcast, hit subscribe and give us 5 stars. It will take like 2 seconds and our algorithm overlords love it. Drink water, call your mom, and have a great day. Peace.